Be sure to watch my TED Talk on londonreal.tv. In London, technology is the Silicon Roundabout. Introducing a new talk show dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. Silicon Real. Each week, interviewing entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, financial technology, accelerators, and incubators in an exciting three-person format. Learn about the people behind the innovation. Locally filmed, locally sourced. Silicon Real. It's about the people. All right, I'm starting this off. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. This is Silicon Real, the video podcast dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. I'm Brian Rose. I also host London Real, which is a similar format. We get three people in the room. We talk a lot of nonsense, see if we can figure some shit out. We've had guests like Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Work Week. We had Bruce Perry from the BBC series Tribe. We've even had drug smuggler Howard Marks in here. All good people. But we're here to talk tech. My co-host today is none other than Mr. Max Kaiser, who hosts the Kaiser Report on the television channel Russia Today. He was formerly our guest on London Real, where we talk about Bitcoins, Bernanke, and Buffett. We had a lot to talk about.
The three Bs.
Yeah, and you were most recently here to talk crowdfunding, maybe crowdfunding George Galloway's run for mayor.
That's right.
And your new company, StartJoin. You're becoming quite a presence here in the Silicon Roundabout, Max.
That's right.
I bump into you sometimes I feel like...
becoming a presence, a nuisance. I'm becoming a nuisance around the Silicon Roundabout area.
Sometimes I feel like you're stalking me. I don't know what's going on.
The Hoxton Grill. That's my office now.
Is that? It's great in there. Free web access.
You get the web access, good coffee. The waiters are very surly, so I feel like I'm back in Paris, which I enjoy. And it's great.
Thank you so much for being co-host today. I appreciate it. It's good to have you here.
Super.
All right, our guest today is Mr. Jon Bradford, who is the managing director at TechStars, which is the #1 startup accelerator in the world.
Reputedly.
Strong words.
Yeah.
I like that. TechStars provides companies with free office space. I think an initial seed investment, maybe around $18,000. In exchange, you take about 6% in the company, and they do a 13-week boot camp program with you.
Absolutely.
In one of 7 cities around the country, around the world. You got Boulder, you got San Francisco, Austin, London. A lot, right?
Yes.
You've had how many companies come through your place?
In total across the board, there's now almost 300. In London, we've just recently opened, so we've only just started. So we've just finished 10 teams, and we're on the lookout for 10 more.
Okay, awesome. Welcome to Silicon Real.
Not top. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. You know, your name has been dropped recently by a lot of people, and I find when I keep hearing someone's name over and over, that sooner or later they need to
Was there a
invite
swear
on the
word
show.
involved in that process?
Just like, blah, blah, Jon Bradford. And I was actually at a law firm this week, Taylor Wessing, a huge international law firm. And I
it wasn't me.
Yeah.
It's completely unfounded.
Really, I don't know. And I was talking with guys. They're very smart guys. They're one of the few law firms to have a presence right here in Shoreditch.
Yeah.
I think they're right here on on Great Eastern Street. And they mentioned you, Simon Walker, one of the partners there, mentioned you, and we were talking about the bubble, the first tech bubble. And I was actually part of that. I was here as a broker in the city of London.
Yeah.
I was 27 years old. This is 1999. I was doing okay, not great. And I got an offer to be the CFO of a .com startup in New York City called LuxuryFinder.com.
Yeah.
We had 15 million in funding from like all the hot names in the Hamptons, like Leon Black and all these crazy people. And I went there and knew nothing about what I was doing. Working in the city is not the same as being a CFO.
Have you ever played Top Trumps? Is Top Trumps a UK thing or a US thing?
Is this like a bluffing game? What is it?
Yeah. So I can beat that. So I was the CFO of a startup in London that had raised $25 million, and equally it had never been heard of before. It was called
what year was this?
paperx.com, and it wasn't a porn.
Okay, what year? What year?
2000.
All right, right around the same time.
We raised $25 million in 6 weeks from the first point we announced it.
This was first quarter 2000, right?
It was the week before Christmas we went out to raise money.
Okay.
And they had closed and the money was in the bank by the end of January.
In 2000?
In 2000.
Right, okay, because a year later you couldn't have done that financing.
In 2001, in March 2001, I switched the lights out.
Yeah, because that was the bubble. Because the top of the NASDAQ was like March or June of 2000?
It was June, because we went from 0 to 85 people, and then about 6 weeks later we were 30.
Okay.
And clearly, like, Soho Square is the place that you really want to start a startup.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about costs of startups. But I remember when I was part of this whole crazy thing, I remember getting a magazine like Wired or Fast Company, and you go through the magazine and there was like twice as many ads as copy.
Yeah.
And there were these full color ads of all these, and the thing was like an inch thick.
Do you remember the conferences? It's the only thing I refer back to. I really think, do you know, conferences then actually had proper swag bags. Like you had tickets for Concord and you had like 3 bags to put inside the bag that you had already turned up with. And it feels like I've been cheated now. You go to a conference and you end up with one of these linen things with 3 things inside.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Let me ask a question.
Go on.
The IPO money that was raised during that time, as you point out, it went into a lot of things like promotion and swag, and it didn't go into the technology actually in a lot of cases. What about today? Is that similar to what you see today?
I think the whole world is a very different place. It's exceptionally lean. I think we did some math. So the $25 million startup. Yeah. We reckoned, I did some math with the CTO about a year ago. To do that startup today, that would be about $1 million.
$1 million, okay.
So there's a huge disparity in terms of the amount of money required.
So going back to the mid to late 90s, dot-coms were started and they had to build technology from scratch. They had to build applications from scratch. So they went to an integrator, a technology integrator.
Absolutely. We spent a huge amount of money with I can't even remember who the integrator was, but we built it and then 6 months later threw it away because it was rubbish.
Right. Now, contrast that with today, to get to your point about costs, these new technologies, they're basically plugging together existing off-the-shelf technologies, remixing them, launching them. So the cost, so you're saying the cost has dropped by, it sounds from what you just said, by 99%.
Absolutely not far away from that. I regularly say that to people, so they get really excited. So there was a second startup after the first one, which raised another $25 million. And they kind of go, you raised $50 million, and say in real money, that's about $2 million today. Because it feels like, it's just, unless you were there, you have no appreciation of, like, it was a big sum, but how much did Webvan raise?
Oh, Webvan, it was here at hundreds of millions,
It was $300 million as their seed round.
To set up that grocery delivery company, right?
And it failed badly.
Okay. Now, so you're at TechStars, you see companies every day. I think you accept like 1% of the candidates that apply. And at first, that doesn't seem like a lot of money that you offer, but you're saying you don't need much these days to get a minimum viable product.
The reality is, coming back to our point about money coming down, is the barrier to entry historically was you had to go and find the right people to give you a lot of money. So the cost has completely collapsed. Now, if you look alongside that, you'll see that historically you've always needed to know the right people, the contacts, the know-how, the expertise. Who are the people you need to be speaking to? That, in some respect, has increased in value over time. But as a total proportion, so if I described like 10 years ago, that was worth $1 million and the cash was 25. Today, it's still $1 million and the startup costs $1 million. So the proportion by which the intangible value of the know-how, the expertise, is actually increasingly more important. And by the way, that cost is continuing to collapse. I don't know quite how far that will go, but it effectively trends towards zero. And so therefore, actually, the need for money is important just to some extent with MVPs and technologies like that to just get the thing started, to keep the lights on, to feed the people.
MVP?
And actually, minimum viable product. So build your first
minimally viable product?
Minimally
viable product?
Exactly.
What is that?
So what is that? That is essentially enough to prove that there is actually a real product or a market for what you're trying to do.
And what is the threshold for that?
In what sense?
How do you know if the value has passed a minimally valuable threshold? A certain
when
number of users?
Somebody says, yes, I like that. And sometimes actually what people mistake is people believe that you have to build technology to prove that there's a product that somebody wants. Actually, there are other ways of proving that, and that might be just physically going and getting in people's faces and actually spending time or doing clipboard surveys or whatever might be the case. The idea that actually you need to build technology first and then, because this is a big European US thing, so the US are extremely good at let's sell it first, and if somebody likes to buy it, we'll build it. And there's a really good example. The examples they give in in kind of the general scheme of things is you put up a big mock website, you say, I've got this really cool service, you really need to sign up, you do the sign up process, and then it comes through and it takes your credit card, and you put in your details, and then you get to the other end and it says, actually, sorry, we haven't built this yet, but when we have, we'll take the money off your credit card. Okay. So there's a proof point that actually somebody wants that product enough that they'll put the money where their mouth is. So that's actually quite a common thing that Americans in the technology scene are actually using as a proof point. Yeah, Europeans tend to be a little bit more shy. You already know this, and they tend to be a little bit more reserved and stare at their feet a little bit more when they go to a nightclub. And what they're more likely to do is let's build it first and let's try and sell afterwards. And you know that more often than not, actually building stuff and what you want and what they want are normally two different things.
So when you say Europeans are more like that, Europe is quite a large region with a lot of variations. And certainly Britain is very different than continental Europe. Yeah. So how do you see that play over those between Britain and continental Europe, or is there no difference?
I think there's a big... well, what's the answer to that? I think Europe is a very old continent. It's been around for a lot longer than, say, for example, the US. So I think there's a lot closer ties between... How old's America?
240 years.
240 years. So how many generations would you describe that?
14.
14. So in 14 generations, you have built everything that you've got today. So at some point, there's normally somebody within the family who has actually started their own business. When you've got something like the Romans did 2,000 years ago, you've got a few more generations. So as a product in Europe, we have a lot more people who work for other people than they start their own businesses. And so, I mean, your point is that we just culturally are not set up to start our own businesses because we've been around so much longer and we've built enough infrastructure and enough kind of corporates. So I think the age of any jurisdiction, I think, actually has an impact upon the number of entrepreneurs in the community.
It's probably true. Max, you look at financial markets all day. Does this feel bubbly at all, the tech sector in London or tech sector in general?
I think it does feel kind of bubbly. I like it. I've just come in the last 6 months or so last year and coming into this area and talking to people. And it has a lot of great energy, I think. This generation coming up right now, I think they are very hungry. I think Mark Zuckerberg has had a huge... Is
it not like the smallest bubbles in the world?
I think
big bubbles. They're like the little frothy ones that come around the edge of a glass.
I think the Mark Zuckerberg phenomenon has galvanized a new generation. I think this generation of 20-somethings around the world are really disgusted with themselves that one of their fellow 20-somethings can be $10 billion richer than they are with something that any one of them could have come up with. And I think in their guts and in their hearts, they're repulsed at themselves. They're self-hating.
This comes up all the time on the show because we think people want to get into this industry because they want to be rock stars.
No.
And it's, as we
it's
know...
Absolutely, it's bullshit.
I know, and like, what's the typical exit? 7 to 10 years, it takes hard work. I mean, you must deal with these people all the time. They want to come in with you, they want to exit in a year.
Have you heard of a one-upreneur?
No. What's that term?
I want to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, want to be. Okay.
So in any kind of, as you describe in the cycle of bubbles, it's like there was a generation that come out and go, oh yeah, we want to be entrepreneurs. That's a one-upreneur. And if you ask the question of an entrepreneur, most of them kind of go, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm just doing my thing. It's like, we had when I originally started my programs, I created this small survey for a bunch of entrepreneurs. The first one was like, so when did you first figure out you were an entrepreneur? And some of them said, am I? Oh, other people tell me I am. I just don't believe, I don't think of it myself. I just build stuff. I build my own business.
And that's the people you want?
Those are the people that we want. That just naturally gravitate toward building businesses rather than like, I'm not trying to be a hipster, or I'm not trying to be a mod or a rocker. It's not a thing. It's something you are. You're not. It's not something you aspire to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a better way of separating wheat from chaff.
Bubbles, small bubbles and big bubbles.
Yeah, let me hit you with a question. We always try to hit people with a bit of devil's advocate. I'm sure you got one, Max, but I'm going to hit you with one. Is the world is it over accelerated? Is it over incubated? We've had Wyra's in here. We've had BizSpark, which is Microsoft's unit.
Yeah.
We see all of the FinTech Innovations Lab and this and this and this. Is it overdone? I mean, this is something you guys have been doing for many, many, many years. years.
Yeah.
Do you see these other, like especially like a Telefonica or a Microsoft, get involved, and you're like, look, we've been doing this. We don't need you here.
Yeah.
Does it hurt you? Does it help you?
Corporates or acceleration? Or
I guess both.
So I think the biggest, so in the world that I exist in, I want smart people to get over the bad ideas and get into good ideas. So the idea of somebody standing around for 12 months in their own time trying to do stuff without any feedback. I mean, what we do is essentially just spin up feedback loops much, much more rapidly. And so what we actually discover is most people, the first thing that they want to do is not necessarily the thing they end up doing. So how do you move people through the cycle much, much faster? And actually, as a community or as a country or whatever you want to describe it, there is latent potential within any culture of a certain amount of entrepreneurs. Yeah. So I think there's a finite number of entrepreneurs in any given country. Yeah. So what you want to do is say, look, you're genuine entrepreneurial. Let's get you doing the good stuff faster, rather than wasting a lot of time spinning your wheels, whatever you want to describe it. And so therefore, you do that, and we do that using other entrepreneurs. So that's the big difference. So if you want to talk about corporates, they do have things to add, but one of the things that we spend a lot of our life doing is, so my funding essentially comes from professional investors and angels. Angels being entrepreneurs. We use entrepreneurs to help the entrepreneurs in the process. So it's a horrible way of describing it, but it's by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And it's almost like you're looking back retrospectively and saying, you know what, I made all of those mistakes. I don't want you to have to repeat them or have to go through them. This is what I would do now. So it's kind of it's a good way of spinning up the ecosystem much, much more rapidly.
Max, what are you feeling like? I mean, you're in the middle of making your startup. It's going to start, I think, in January. What are you finding is the hardest thing? Is it getting the right people? Is it getting the right mentors? Like, getting the right contacts in the industry or developers?
I would say the biggest challenge in this space is coming up with a viable product plan and information architecture, like the documentation that goes into it, that is the scaffolding upon which you build and go forward upon, to avoid the dreaded scope creep. The idea you're going off the main thoroughfare of what you're trying to develop. So finding people that can manage a project managers, I've always found to be the most difficult person to find. There's great technologists, people that can create programs and do things like this, but they're not necessarily good project managers. Finding a good project manager, however, is worth 10 good technologists, or whatever the ratio is. But I think fortunately, I have found a couple of people that really fit the bill. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Is that a story you hear a lot?
See, I would argue something slightly different. I think actually in London today, one of the biggest problems is there's a lack of good technical resource. Now, it might be product or project guys, but there's not a lack of, as I described earlier, entrepreneurs. It's kind of the BD guys. There's like a million of those guys running around Old Street today. But actually the thing which is you lack is the capacity to actually build interesting things and deliver things on time.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just in terms of managing a project and develop and having deliverables and delivering those things on time. So
ideas are really cheap, but it's actually delivering a product.
Execution and delivering is hard to find people who can do that.
And I think that's readily recognized across the board, both by other entrepreneurs and government and things. And it'd be interesting to see where they come back in terms of what's the solution to, because we spend a lot of our life trying to import talent from whether it's Estonia or Romania or Bulgaria or whatever might be the case. But we still haven't. What's happened, and I know you guys know this already, is over the last 12 or 18 months, there's definitely been an increased activity around startups here, and the argument that actually seed capital is now a lot more available than it was because of tax breaks in the UK. But you suddenly have talent, really good ideas, you've got money, but then there's this gap of like, I now need to employ another 4 people. I just can't find those 4 people to actually need to be able to address that problem.
Let me ask you, Silicon Alley in New York was always the runner-up in the startup space and was really kind of treading water for a number of years. Yeah. And then within the last 24 months, I would say it's exploded, right? So you've got these $1 billion startups coming out. So it was just a matter of getting a certain critical mass, and then boom, it became huge. So in London, you've got a front row seat.
Yeah.
Is it something like this in the works? Is this critical mass coming where suddenly, boom, $1 billion startup pops up, and then it's suddenly like, they're on the map and they're off to the races?
So I think the answer to your question is absolutely. But I don't think they pop up. I think they already exist. They're just not mainstream enough for people to recognize that they're coming through. So to get to $1 billion, even Mark Zuckerberg, who did an awesome job at Facebook, it took them 7 years to float a business.
People forget that.
These things just don't they might feel like they're overnight. They don't. So you're absolutely right. With New York, these things have suddenly become much more, I think the word you're looking for is mainstream. It's part of the public, the ecosystem. And sorry, it's not even the ecosystem, it's just mainstream.
Let me ask you this. So now that New York is a big, let's say, rival to Silicon Valley, because New York is culturally a very different place than California, and it seems as though talent's actually being pulled from California to New York, from kind of the Stanford space, more East Coast. Is that true? Or do you see that happening? And could it happen to London where somebody's saying, you know what, I kind of want to be in London because culturally it suits me, and so you might see just the cultural backdrop be an influencing factor?
So I don't think we're actually drawing people away from Silicon Valley. But I think people are making decisions not to move to Silicon Valley to start their own businesses. I think that's a real difference. And actually saying, I think that's one of the big ethoses around TechStars, which is you should be able to build your business wherever you are. And that's hence, actually, the point being is we're actually everywhere apart from Silicon Valley. So we started in Boulder, and we went to Boston, New York, Seattle, Austin, London.
So that's you're making a conscious effort to stay out of there.
We've made a conscious issue. I think David Cohen, the founder, basically says we love working in ecosystems with a chip in the shoulder that actually want to not be in the valley, but actually want to be able to do the stuff right there on the ground with themselves.
Like Max says, are we missing something in London? I mean, are we missing that PayPal effect where someone has a huge $1 billion exit and then those 10 entrepreneurs take their 50 million and reinvest it?
And that's not just a London thing, that's a European thing. Because the conceptual idea of options and things like that has just not been pervasive within the general ecosystem. So when businesses have exited and made lots of money, there hasn't been this second order effect. You want to create people who have enough money to pay the mortgage, but not enough money to retire. Because actually when you paid for the mortgage and all you have is your personal living costs, then it creates a whole different dynamic in terms of like, I just need to have enough to feed myself, but then I can take bigger risks about like doing something interesting. And you've maybe had the back seat in terms of you might not have been the founder, but you might have been one of the first 10 employees. You know what it feels like to be in a business that grows. And the big difference, and there's a really good example of that, in the northeast of England, there's an organization called Sage, which was, and I think technically still is, the biggest software company floated in the UK. And 99% of the shares were still held by the founders when it floated. Because the business started in the 80s and only started making progress in the 90s, the idea of giving away shares to employees just seemed like alien. So I think there's certain things in the system which will spin up, and you're absolutely right. Until we have that generation, I see that generation coming through with Huddle, I see that with Moshi Monsters, I'll see that with, there's a lot of other businesses that middle management section will benefit and be able to pocket 2 or 3 million, or enough to actually say, I haven't got enough to retire, but I've got enough to start taking risks next time out.
How many companies are on your radar, like on a daily basis? I mean, like that you try to get involved with, hook them up, or try to grow their presence even after the boot camps?
So selfishly, I work on the assumption that I will help anybody who kind of reaches out to me.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's fine.
People heard that, and you're going to get a lot of emails.
Well, I mean, genuinely, I was talking this morning at a demo day, and I said, look, it's dead easy. My name's Jon, Jon, and I work for a company called TechStars.com. If you can't guess my email address, you don't really deserve to get my attention. It's a hurdle. It's not a very big hurdle, but it's amazing how many people, I mean, this is the big cultural difference between the US and Europe. So having that conversation in Europe doesn't incentivize somebody to email me. There's a significant proportion of people who go, oh, you mean I have to email you? You won't just help me. And it's you laugh like it's the smallest hurdle in the world. But it's amazing how many Europeans or London-based people will not reach out and do that. And maybe it's this cultural thing. I mean, I have this big thing which is like the Brits did pretty well at one point in terms of world domination and the Commonwealth, and had the empire and
Did
stuff.
pretty well. That's spoken like a true Irishman.
We're pretty stupid. There's a whole different story behind that as well. But what's interesting about that
You built the Titanic, though.
Yeah, it didn't go
Up
very
in
far.
Belfast.
Jesus. You had to bring that up, right, Max?
Yeah, well,
Right.
it was okay. But what's interesting is, I think what's ended up happening is the Brits, by their very nature, are very diplomatic. The English are exceptionally diplomatic. When you run an empire that big, there's so many politics, like diplomacy is actually one of the most important parts. But actually, I personally believe that what that means is the way the Brits actually speak, all of the language is very couched. We might do that. We could do that. We should do that. Americans have a very affirmative. The language is very much affirmative.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know.
And it's this trickle-down effect. It's about the emails again, which is, well, I might email you. It's like Americans would say, I will email you.
I'm almost surprised when I'm invited to be on the BBC. They sent an email saying, we would like to call you about and discuss the possibility of perhaps having you on the show if it works within, maybe, right? Yeah. And then you call them up and they'll say, we're thinking about having you on this show, and this is what we're thinking about talking about, and are you in London? Now, contrast that with a New York network. They'll say, please be at the studio at 3 p.m. to talk about so-and-so. Thank you. Click.
Yeah, exactly. But it's amazing. I think there are subtleties within the system that it's not about money and it's not about engineering talent. There are culturally things that actually have to change. And it's not just like a British thing. There's a whole bunch of Europeans which are exactly like that.
But isn't there also a political element? I mean, in the UK, obviously, there's a huge political divide between right now being played out with this so-called benefits, cutbacks in benefits, and the outcry from sectors of the society that feel that they're having their benefits cut, and they deserve the state to be providing these benefits. Yeah. And the state is saying, we want you to be more entrepreneurial. We want you, going back to the whole Thatcher revolution, right? The state is taking this position. Yeah. So there is a political element to this as well, where people almost are reluctant to be entrepreneurs because they think they're becoming political sellouts. Like they're forsaking their roots, that go back to the socialist roots. I mean, this is a huge...
Are you suggesting that Europe are just a bunch of communists?
There's a huge socialist, and communist political baggage that a lot of people still carry that seems to interfere with their notions of just becoming entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but does politics not just interfere with entrepreneurship in general? I mean, I always describe, and I'll probably get shot down for this at some point in the future, the interesting thing, we talked about why is this happening today? Actually, one of the things that and this will be thrown in my face at some point in the future, we should be thankful of the bankers completely blowing up the economic system. Because actually the reason why, to some extent, entrepreneurship is a necessary evil is because there was a meltdown 4 or 5 years ago.
Which kind of brings us back to something here in London, which is financial technology or fintech. Yeah. Because clearly they seem to be the world leader in this area, tech. Yeah. They lead Silicon Valley. Yeah. They lead Silicon Alley. They're the number one in the world. Or is that a perception that's misguided, or is that true?
It's absolutely true. And actually, if we were having this conversation in a week's time, I might be able to tell you something which was profoundly interesting about the need to do fintech businesses in the city of London today.
What are the success stories? I mean, we've had TransferWise in here. We've talked about Wonga when you were here. Yeah. Are there other ones that are behind the scenes? Stripe, I guess that's kind of more American.
That's an American.
Yeah.
Actually, that's
They're over
Irish.
Here now. Yeah. John Collison, our guest, second guest.
Exactly, him and his brother. Yeah. I think what's interesting is coming back to this is a 7-year span, and even like Tavid with TransferWise, he's into year 3 or 4 of the business. Yeah. So I think there's a huge number of businesses which are coming through which have really strong potential, but in any given day it's really hard to call which ones are going to come through. But I think that's a big difference when you walk around Old Street. If you kind of go back, the ones that come up time and time again are the businesses that started 6 or 7 years ago. So there's kind of a whole spectrum which are going to come through in the intervening period. I wouldn't want to call anybody out.
And besides fintech, because it comes up a lot here, as you would expect, because we're in London. But besides fintech, what else do you see London winning in as opposed to the Valley.
So what I don't think we win. I think everybody wins. That's really stupid and couched and political.
It is.
So I have to.
But you're not a socialist.
I'm not a socialist.
Okay, but nobody
Actually,
wins.
No, I'll tell you
Nobody
what.
wins, but you're not a socialist.
He's from
Okay.
Belfast, so he's half American, half
No,
British.
yeah, exactly. So actually, in fairness, I regularly say to people I'm completely apolitical. Having been born and brought up in Belfast, I have a complete distrust of politicians. That was ingrained into me.
I could see that happening.
And I have,
Fair enough.
and I say this, it's kind of, I cringe when I say it because I've got friends who have actually fought in wars to have the vote. I've never voted in my life.
Wow.
And actually, I will probably go to my grave never voting because
You and Russell Brand.
I actually just think it encourages them. I mean, if we had an option which was none of the above, I would start voting. Yeah, actually make voting in the UK compulsory, and then the bottom one at the bottom says none of the above, and see how many people vote for. Actually, I don't want to vote for somebody.
I agree with that. There's a couple of countries have
Yeah,
that.
Australia does that. You can actually be thrown into jail if you don't vote.
Right, but you have the choice of none of the above.
Do you? I don't
know about that. I
think
thought you were
typically you
saying
have
this.
to vote for one of them, and what they do is they score the card as a protest statement, which is I don't want to vote for any of these people.
Okay.
Sorry. So what was the question?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember what the question was. I am curious because we're sitting here, we're rubbishing the Europeans and the socialists, and I agree with a lot of that. But is there something that London does better? I mean, I must say, one thing about the drinkabouts that you go to is that it's not everyone I talk to isn't pitching me and isn't giving me their card.
Yeah.
And it's not like this really hardcore way that the Americans do business. And there is something nice about that it's more of a community. And people
You've been
help
here
me.
too long.
Yeah, I know. Max, help me out here.
Oh, you've gone native.
So your point is well made, and actually, in fairness, coming back to your question about New York, there's actually I think that London is much more analogous to New York than to Silicon Valley or anywhere else, and I think in some respects they will become rivals or they'll actually become very strong partners with each other. So I think media in London is really strong, and it is in New York. I think ad tech is really strong in both parts. I think fashion and creativity is really strong in both locations. Fintech, New York, London, are also very strong in those two. So I think there's actually, they're almost like kissing cousins, whether they'd like to admit it or not. And I think a lot of those things that we described, actually the Valley is not particularly good at. Like some of the biggest entertainment businesses in the world, if we kind of exclude people like Universal and Disney and the old school, actually have come out of Europe, whether it's Spotify, Last.fm. So there are things that Europe are actually
Post-production here in London is doing all the big post-production apparently for Hollywood movies and stuff.
Exactly. So I think it's rather than we're better, we just do, well, actually we are better at certain topics than others because we have an industry. It's not to do with the technology, it's actually the background in the industry and the sectors that exist are strong sectors and industries in the country. And the question is, can the tech community actually, or can those communities themselves pull together and actually do interesting things? I actually think fintech is actually a really interesting space, and you talked about it. TransferWise is a really good example. Wonga is another financial sector business. And there will be a series of them. I mean, I've seen a few. Damien from Judil.
Judil, I've heard the name.
Judil is another really strong startup. Yeah.
What about you? What if you had to sign like an accelerator NDA and you couldn't do what you do anymore, and you had a chunk of capital and you had to pick one sub-vertical? What would you go into?
So I already do 2 other startups.
Okay.
In my spare time because I've just got so much time in my hands. So I actually I'm a founder of a business called F6S, which is essentially, if you apply to an accelerator today, I think we now cover off something like 95% of all accelerators actually use that platform as an application process. So that was born out of my personal frustration when I was running accelerators, which was actually you get 1,000 applications. How do you whittle them down to 10 at certain points? And so we built a whole bunch of mechanics to make that really easy and collaborative and blah, blah, blah. So that we did. And what's interesting about that is there's now something like over 1,000 accelerators around the world. I mean, there's a massive number because it's so cheap to do and actually to spin up. And all of the real value is in the know-how and the expertise. So that's kind of one thing I do. The other one, and the other story I tell about that is when there's a gold rush around accelerators, what you want to do, sell spades. Yeah. So it's kind of, we're selling infrastructure. We don't even sell it. We give the infrastructure away for free. The second one is, and it only just launched today, is a European tech blog called tech.eu with a guy called Robin Walters, who used to work for Mike Arlington at TechCrunch and then at NextWeb. Because one of the big personal frustrations I've always had is, much as I hate saying this, I think one of the core elements of a really strong ecosystem is having a really good media. And I was talking to the guys from The Economist about this yesterday. And I personally feel that in Europe, we genuinely don't have anybody to stand up and represent European tech businesses in the media, because NextWeb and TechCrunch are very West Coast centric.
Okay.
So that was something that I've kind of gone away and fixed. So I tend not to think of opportunity. I think I spend my life thinking about, like, what are the practical bits in the system that might need fixing.
And what did you do? In other words, I understand TechCrunch and these folks are very West Coast centric. So you did what?
So Robin was the European editor for NextWeb, and they had a reorganization in the middle of this year, and so we decided that we would start a European tech blog,
which is
called tech.eu.
Okay, so tech.eu. And so how long has it been up and running?
What time is it?
So it's brand new.
It's
fresh.
about 3 hours old.
Okay, so this.
So we've been planning this, and it actually launched at 2:00 this afternoon. This is Friday.
So popping out of the digital womb is this new startup, as almost in real time.
In real time.
So people are seeing that, like they're in the operating table room, and they're seeing it being birthed.
So
like aliens. So you think it's undercovered, the tech sector here?
So what's interesting is each of the different, so Europe is going to be different. Actually, Europe's not that different from the US. So historically, the US has been very focused around Silicon Valley. And what's happened over the last 2 years, you talked about it with New York, is there's been an eruption of tech hubs, being two words, not one, across the US. And whether that's Austin or Boston or New York or Seattle or wherever, there's suddenly this, like, you can do startups anywhere. You don't have to get in a plane and fly to the West Coast. And Europe is very, very similar in terms of, it's got London, it's got Berlin, there's interesting things happening in Paris and Stockholm, in Helsinki. But what's also interesting is the media is very regionalized as well. And so therefore, if you actually want to know anything about European startups today, it's really hard to find somewhere which is a node or a portal or whatever. So tech.eu is essentially, what we've done is, we don't plan on it being a large organization, but the idea behind it is we want to have 2 or 3 really good journalists that actually write original content. They might only write 2 or 3 articles a day, but what we're going to try and do is aggregate some of the content from each of these local media outlets and actually float up and curate some of the best pieces. But it's almost like to say, if you're an American and you're looking across and you say, I have to read something about what's going on in Europe today, there's a natural hub to actually start to glean some of that content. So that's kind of what we're playing around with. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but it's worth trying.
Max, what do you like in London besides fintech?
I would not say
the warm beer
that I'm the best. Really, I'm still kind of new to it. You know, I'm just exploring what's going on here. So I wouldn't say I'm the best.
So what do you see being different from here, from New York? Given I just said they're the same thing, but maybe timing's slightly.
Yeah, I think it's just six months to 12 months before it really breaks out in a big way. So I find that exciting, because it's going to be it's always exciting to be part of a big wave like that. And
it's going to be longer, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, but since I'm part of it, I'm optimistically. You know, I'd like to think that I will be helping that happen
in dog years.
Do you find that you doing what you're doing right now with Start Showing that it's easier to do, say in London, that if you were doing something similar in New York, there might be more people to do it? I know Courtney Boyd Myers was here. It was hard to get any idea out because there's so much going on in the media and so many ideas and so many companies. Do you think it's easier to start something here?
Well, I've always been involved in fintech in some way, or I like to call fintech media.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that for 15 years in one form or another, or going back even longer than that. So when I came here and started meeting up with people, there was already a huge, fintech infrastructure. And I met a lot of folks that were doing very, very high-end projects for banks in the city with very big budgets and doing very exciting projects. But they were not necessarily had a startup budget in mind. So, but then kind of digging down deeper into it, found people that were ready to break out, and get more entrepreneurial. But in that space, I think there's a lot of talent.
What's the biggest mistake you see startups making?
Staring at their feet.
Okay. And want to be rock stars. No, but staring at their feet, what do you mean? Not making that phone call, not pitching, what?
Not getting out and not talking to people.
Do you think it is about meeting people, ultimately?
People are, one of my teams recently that went through TechStars, they literally they buried themselves in a bedroom for 2 years and built this awesome piece of tech. And you kind of turn up and you say, so what do you usually think about it? They say, we haven't launched it yet. It's like, well, it isn't finished yet. It's like, oh.
This goes back to the autistic comments you made earlier.
Yeah.
So I think this is the big struggle that Europe has, which is Americans are very naturally salespeople, whereas Europeans are, we want to polish stuff before we give it to anybody. And maybe that's an education system as much as anything to do. Somebody said to me, tell me if I'm wrong, that actually kids at high school actually are taught to do presentations, or not taught to do presentations, but regularly have to stand up in front of their peers and do presentations.
In the
high
States?
School. Yeah. I don't know, is that true?
I remember show and tell when I was a kid, but there's debate.
But show and tell, like show and tell,
maybe that
is something my 3-year-old now does. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when I was in high school,
it's not something I did.
When I was in high school, we had a closed circuit television network,
Really?
and people were doing their own TV shows.
Yeah.
And that was broadcast to the entire school.
Yeah.
Because it was right next to New York City, and somebody's father worked at NBC, and they were upgrading their studio, and they took the old studio and stuck it in the high school.
Yeah.
So then suddenly people had access to state-of-the-art broadcasting technology and started making shows. So I think just proximity to New York and media is why you see huge media spillover into the environs of New York City.
So maybe it is an American thing.
There's a total lack of salespeople in Europe. People are very, very.
We've never rubbished Europe before so much on the Silicon Valley episode.
It's okay. It's me. It's not you.
Yeah, you're European.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm Irish.
Yeah. All right.
We hang off the edge of Europe. Yeah.
Yeah. You have the euro. So
Yeah.
Actually, you don't in Belfast.
Not in the Belfast.
Okay,
We don't.
all right,
Well, on Wall Street, right? There's that saying: "Ready, aim, fire."
Yeah.
Or "Ready, fire, aim."
Yeah.
Ready, fire, aim.
And that.
So that was on Wall Street. Just get the order first, and then worry about the details later. Just get the order, and then worry about it later. Right. So I think you don't find that here so much. People are very, they want to.
I don't see this as rubbishing it. I think it's kind of saying it's not even saying the unsayable. Most people recognize this in the environment, and they know that somehow they need to be much better at it themselves. So I don't think. I don't personally think it's rubbishing it. I think it's just saying something which already is known and exists in the system here.
But there's an industry around that British shyness, let's say. Let's talk about 4 Weddings and a Funeral and Hugh Grant. Okay, that became a multinational huge hit because women fell in love with Hugh Grant, who is not the American, overselling guy, but the reserved, fella. That became a stereotype. It became a type. And it was huge. And you see that playing throughout British marketing, Schweppes is effort, something. They understated. The understated sale is part of the sale. They're selling understatedness but in an aggressive way.
I'm just trying to work out who you're going to find in the next 23 weeks, who is the Hugh Grant of the tech world.
I'm thinking
there's a challenge for you.
I know. We're gonna find that guy. What happens when someone leaves your boot camp? Are they out of the womb? Do you literally kick them out, or do you try to take them on a road show to get more funding, or what happens?
So the teams themselves physically stay in the same space. So the teams have access to the physical space we're in for up to 8 to 9 months. So they don't go anywhere. We like to try and keep them in the same space to keep momentum within the organization. I tend to run away and do other things in terms of trying to find the next 10 teams. But we create a support structure for the teams. Part of it's peer-to-peer support. But it really is at some point you got to let them free and get on with things. But one of the things that we recognize is not whether it's week 2 after the program, but it's something that we feel that we need to do better at, which is supporting the teams beyond the program. One of the things that happens practically is they tend to raise additional funding. So on average, the teams which actually participate in TechStars go on to raise about $1.5 million. So they get handed over to another entrepreneur or other investor. And so therefore our job to some extent is done at that stage. We still act in their interests because we take exactly the same shares as the founders. We don't take typical investor type shares. So our personal approach is, if you're the founder, we have exactly the same shares as you. So you're looking out for us and we're looking out for you. And over a 5 or 7 year period of a startup, the biggest problem is, I was going to say lawyers, it's not that far away, but you're going to have a bunch of legals that happen in the system, and you can't write in all of the clauses that you need to protect yourself. So the best way what we've discovered is we just align ourselves with the founders, and that's the best protective mechanism for us as shareholders.
$1.5 million on average?
On average.
That's big. That's a lot of money.
And that's across 300 businesses. Like, that's not like 10 on average. So we've got pretty strong proof that it actually works.
You got the Midas touch over at TechStars.
It takes 7 years, but there's a few small gold mines in the middle of our portfolio, so we're pretty happy about it.
All right, I got to hit you the question which we hit everyone with here. I might have hit you with this on Max on London Real, but if you could make the phone call to the 20-year-old Jon Bradford and give that young man from Belfast a bit of advice, what would you tell him to do?
Why the hell did you do accountancy?
As a job,
as you can tell, yeah, I'm a fully qualified chartered accountant with tax exams and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I think what would I say is, why did it take me so bloody long to learn that actually I didn't work in corporate environments very well? I worked for Arthur Andersen for 10 years. And they announced to me 3 weeks into my training, they said, do you know what? You're a Pure. A P-U-R-E. I said, what the hell's that? And he said, a previously unrecognized recruitment error.
Jesus.
Nice.
That's harsh.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I was there for a few more years afterwards. So I think the thing I struggled with was I kind of have a reverence, and within a corporate structure, even with someone like Arthur Andersen, I seem to always be the stone in the shoe. And at that point, I just felt really odd. It just didn't feel right. Having said that, I couldn't be what I am today without having done all of the things I've done in the past. And that's part of the rationale I do what I do with what I do today. Sorry, there's too many to-dos. Is actually teaching people that they don't need to go and work for a large corporate. It's actually completely okay to actually just get out there and start your own business, and it's not an odd thing. And it's the most normal thing to do in the world.
You think they should do that straight out of school, or do you think you should go, get some experience in a big company, go to Payne Weber when you're a young kid, or go to the bank, that kind of thing? Do you think they should do that, or go straight in?
On any given day, I change my mind. Am I allowed to change my mind? So sometimes I actually think the person I am today is because I actually had a framework that I learned to do a whole bunch of stuff. And it's a bit like going to university. It's the capacity to think within a framework and being able to give the freedom to actually do those things is actually valuable. Going straight out of university and just being told to just go make it up. But then some people are just built that way. I mean, I've got a very good friend, you should interview him, a guy called Dwayne, who ran Cashflow. And he tells an amazing story. I'm not even going to tell you the story, but get Dwayne on from Cashflow. Right. He's just awesome.
I would ask Dwayne to email me, but then he might not if he's European.
Yeah. So. Oh, it's okay. He's a proper East End boy.
Okay.
That's actually just sold his business for I don't think I'm allowed to say,
but
don't say. A lot of money.
Okay, what was I going to say? Advice to the 20-year-old listening who wants to be part of TechStars or wants to get into this crazy business. What do you tell them? What's one thing that they should be doing?
Doing it come what may. So what we spend our life trying to do is find people who are doing it, and we can help them. It's a bit like this weird thing around investment capital. You don't raise investment capital to start a business. You start a business and sometimes you need investment capital. TechStars is exactly the same thing. I don't want people to join TechStars to start a business. I want TechStars to be there to help support them in a business that they're growing already. So the best thing they can do is just get on, build a kick-ass product, and make a real business. And that's the same, as I say, whether that's TechStars and investment capital or VCs or angels. And I think there's a real risk in today's environment that people think it comes a different way. That's the real problem with whether you call it Shark Tank or what's the UK
Dragon's
version?
Den?
Dragon's Den, which is so I know one of the guys who used to be on that program, and he said when I sat on one of the panels one day, and I suddenly realized people were coming to me and saying, "I want your money to start a business." They said, "You got it completely wrong. That's just the wrong way of doing this stuff."
And that's why you take a small stake, 6% or 10%, keep it low. So
we want to just be enough so that we can make money for our investors, but we don't get in the way.
Okay. Awesome, John. Thanks so much for being here. I just wanted to get Max's opinion. Have you changed your mind on Wonga, or do you feel the same way as you did a few weeks ago? There was a recent ruling.
Well, they recently, because of my campaigning, they've had their business capped.
Is it capped? Is it
They've
over?
had it capped. Not over,
but it's looking that
been
way.
capped. So
you?
my campaign, I've taken full credit.
So how many billions of dollars have you just taken off their share capital potential value?
Well, I think of it more in terms of how many billions of dollars of people will not be impoverished by the predatory lending techniques of this scallywag.
You're
Wonga.
bringing down the entrepreneurial spirit.
Scallywag, you really have been here too long.
It's socialism what you're doing. You're bringing them down. They were providing a service. No?
No.
I liked Wonga, but all right.
No.
So
Clearly I hit a nerve because they've been capped. So next they'll be kneecapped. So it's either they reform.
That's
or,
Belfast.
Yeah, exactly. We go Belfast. Either you reform or we put a
send
cap
you to
in your ass,
Belfast.
That's
it's
it.
a dangerous company to invest in because they're worth $1 billion, and now they're probably not. Just a little piece of
So-
legislation.
Well, it's called risk. Capitalism entails risk. Do you just want to be handed money with no risk? That's what I don't like about these bankers in the UK.
Europe.
They don't want to take risk. They just want free money all day long. What's the problem with you people?
They haven't floated yet. You can't invest in them.
No, it was a rough valuation, I guess. Now who would want to? So, all right. So, thank you for getting rid of Wonga, Max.
Yeah. What else is on your hit list?
We're getting rid of Western Union and a company in the UK called World First, which is a Forex market.
So one of my teams has just recently completed TechStars, is actually going after Best Western. Best Western? No, that's the wrong. Western Union.
It's a hotel chain. Best Western.
Because actually, you're right. The average fee that they have is they take 10% of money's transferred.
Oh yeah, because it's similar like payday loans. They just scalp the people that can't afford to have bank accounts, right?
There's another one. You should have Lawrence on. Lawrence is awesome.
Okay.
Who's doing this? He's originally from Nigeria.
Okay.
And actually, the reason why he's doing what he's doing is because he's been through that process of having to send money home to his mum, who wasn't particularly well and had to go to
the
hospital.
remittance business is ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
To put
Exactly.
it in the
So yeah,
parlance of
So
this
you're going
particular-
after them as well.
Lawrence is trying to fix that one.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Not personally, but more as a collective.
As a collective.
Yeah.
They're a big collective of that collective.
They're going out of business. All those businesses that are sending money using the techniques that they're currently using are going to be out of business in 3 years. They'll all be gone.
You know the finance world very well, Max. What else do you see? Do you think foreign exchange is going to be taken away from the big banks and go into some type of fintech startup and other markets on top of that?
Yeah, foreign exchange is and money wiring and all these services are directly in the crosshairs of Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
So I was going to say to you, so do you do weekly predictions on what the price of Bitcoin is going to be the following week?
Jesus, if we did, when Max was first on here, Bitcoin was like at a couple $100 maybe.
That's right.
That was
So did
6 months ago.
We got to 1,000.
Yeah, it's
this
at
week?
1,100. It went over the price of gold just a couple of hours, yesterday.
Oh, what, one Bitcoin for 1 ounce?
One Bitcoin went over $1,240. Went over the price of gold. So, but the Bitcoin as a money transfer mechanism.
Yeah.
Somebody sent $150 million last week in Bitcoin. Their total cost was 39 cents.
Was that the CIA?
It's unknown who sent that money.
How do we know
total
that was
cost
sent?
was because it's all in the public ledger. It's all in the
you can see the
blockchain. So you can
transfers.
see it's all happening.
And what? Then we had
Now, the bank doing that same
Iran
transaction.
agreed to drop all of its nuclear programs this week. Is there something connected here?
The
Stranger
cheapest,
things have happened.
The cheapest.
What, Iran and the CIA?
What's a good way of?
Never happened.
Well, I mean, if you want to get into that kind of comparative game, I mean, let's talk about HSBC. It's an $8 billion money laundering operation for Mexican drug lords that they've been directly responsible for 60,000 decapitations in the last few years. So who's a terrorist, buddy? Who's a terrorist?
Hey, I'm not on the CIA.
Who's a terrorist? Who's the terrorist here?
Be careful,
But
Max.
look,
I'll jump all over you.
so 39 cents to send $150 million. Now, the cheapest any bank can offer that service of all the money center banks is $200,000. So, I mean, how are you going to compete with that? You can't. So they're going to have to radically reform or go away.
And what's your call on this latest price increase by Bitcoin? Does it help things? Does it help the market?
Yeah, it does, because it gets people talking about it, it gets the media talking about it, gets adoption rates higher. Clearly, it's volatile, but as the use of Bitcoin is exploding in China, it's hitting in India, and the remittance business is huge.
So how valuable does the total population of Bitcoin have to be before it's a proper currency? Or a tradable currency in a stable...
My guru on Bitcoin is a guy named Rick Folkvinia.
He was here 2 days ago, sitting there.
He started the Swedish Pirate Party.
Yeah.
And he's the Time magazine's 100 smartest guys in the world are in the running or something.
And he says between $2 and $5 million a Bitcoin is where it's
says
stable.
Somebody said to me yesterday it had to be at least 100,000 per Bitcoin to get to a certain liquidity level.
If it captures 1% of the Forex market, which it can do, that's $100,000 per Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But that's the Satoshi, which is the 1/100,000th of a Bitcoin. I mean, then you'd be trading in these Satoshis, and you wouldn't be trading this, in Bitcoin itself. But
So the number of outstanding Bitcoins, which is at around 10 million, going to 21 million, that doesn't even matter, does it? Since they're infinitely divided.
But how long will it take to get to 21?
it's like another 100 years.
Is it? But that doesn't even matter, the number, because if you can divide it to whatever, it doesn't really matter how much,
That's right.
how many
It's
there
divisible to quadrillions.
So I was completely lost in this until somebody talked to me and said, actually, don't think of it as a currency, think of it as a commodity. And think of it like gold.
Yeah, I think
and it's a tradable commodity and a very highly liquid commodity.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But it's like there's a physical mass, and the word mining is not there for just a reason. But it's like we have an asset, and what you're having is basic economics, which is supply and demand. There's an increasing amount of demand for a liquid asset, and there's a finite amount of supply. So it's only going to do one thing. The question tends to be, at what point does it flatten out?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a big guessing game, and a lot of different folks have different opinions on that. But I agree with you. You think of it more as a commodity. I think of it, I call it, like when I was on ITV this week, they said, what is a Bitcoin? So for the ITV audience, I said, well, it's a precious number.
Yeah.
You know what a precious stone is and a precious metal. This is a precious number. There's very few of them, and they're highly sought after. Yeah. And they take it from there.
There's a Warren Buffett quote I read these days, and he said, gold is something that we pay people to dig out of the ground so we can then take it and put it in a hole and pay people to guard it for us. That's how he described it as a commodity.
But there is actually a cost of mining Bitcoins.
There is.
There is.
Absolutely.
So it's not that dissimilar.
Yeah, but gold is outperforming Berkshire Hathaway by a huge factor for the last 10 years, 15 years, up until the last 2 years. So as an investment, gold's been outperforming his vehicle, Berkshire Hathaway. I'd rather be in gold, compounding at 22%, 23%, up until recently anyway. So, I mean, as an investment vehicle, it's been outperforming Berkshire Hathaway. So I'm not sure, if I'm looking for outright rates of return, silver also, the number one return has been silver over Berkshire Hathaway. So he's just blowing smoke up everyone's ass.
That's why you're here, Max, to tell us these things. Thank you. Max, I hope you don't retire with all of your Bitcoin wealth.
It's a daily struggle.
I hope you stay around. Rick was here, the Pirate Party guy, and he said that he predicts a future where the new wealthy oligarchs will be all of these tech geeks that got in on Bitcoin on the ground up. Yeah. And instead of seeing like all these, Russian money and Chinese money, you'll see all this geek money, and they'll be going around like living large, and they'll be running shit. And we'll be like, God damn it. It's this whole paradigm that we didn't think it existed.
It all depends.
And Max will be up there too.
Yeah.
Well, we were the first media outlet to cover it 3 years ago.
3 years ago. And you've owned them for longer than that.
Yeah, we've been covering it. I've owned them. But many people in this space, one of the early adopters, I mean, if you put $30,000 into this 3.5 years ago, it's worth $100 million. For $30,000. So I mean, a lot of these people.
But why would you have put $30,000 into this 3
years
ago?
Well, because people who got it right away. Like I went with Rick to this conference in Prague, 3 years ago, and just the people in the room were complete converts to this idea. Yeah. And they were accumulating these things. And once you understand what it is and how it works, it's really a shift in how you think, and people accumulate them. So a lot of people have $100 million, not a lot, but $100 million, $10 million from virtually nothing. That's a pretty common occurrence at this point. And of course, every single day, you see millionaires just popping out like bubbles out of a champagne bottle.
That's scary. Do you feel vindicated in some way, Max?
Of course, I feel vindicated. I'd like to take,
in 2 weeks' time, you'll be a billionaire.
Exactly. So there will be a Bitcoin billionaire pretty soon. I mean, the Silk Road guy, his
the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah, his stash.
The guy accused of being the Dread Pirate.
The alleged guy.
Yeah.
Even the ones that the FBI can't hack, they're worth $500 million.
$500 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, Max made a good point, is that all the Bitcoins they seized from the Dread Pirate Roberts, if that is him, they can't touch.
That's right. Can't hack it.
They can't hack it. So it's still out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's not a coincidence. In the last couple of years, you've seen encryption play a big role politically with Edward Snowden.
Is that kind of like, do you know when ships like sink in the middle of the ocean and you create this bounty that you can go after? Is there an equivalent of actually going and finding those Bitcoins? Is there bounty hunters for Bitcoins?
Well, the fact that it's impregnable. It's done. Like the guy,
or does it become a wasted asset?
You saw it's dead. There's a lot of Bitcoins that are just been lost and will never be retrieved.
I think it's like a ship analogy, except there's so much ocean. Like
you just will never find it.
Unfindable.
Yeah.
Like the guy who we just learned this past week, he had Bitcoins on an old laptop that he threw into a landfill.
Yeah,
they're worth $5 million now. Now that landfill, those Bitcoins, I think, are safe to say, are gone.
Yeah.
They're gone.
That's a fair point. Yeah. So actually, in fairness, the 10 million Bitcoins actually aren't 10 million.
Oh, that's right. It's less than the number because they're gone.
They've been demined.
The actual
put back in the ground.
Yeah, the actual float is probably a lot smaller.
Okay, and where's Bitcoin going next? Is it going to be stable here, drop again?
No, I don't think it'll achieve any kind of stability for a while at a much higher price.
Okay, but still going up.
Yeah, a lot of volatility. I mean, what's interesting, I guess in the last couple of weeks, you've seen the emergence of these alternatives to Bitcoin, like Litecoin. Yeah. And there's like 50 or 60 other alternative currencies. And a lot of people are now trading in between the currencies. And I think that's very healthy. It's good competition. And it just forces more adoption. And I think it's very positive for Bitcoin.
Okay.
And I think the Chinese are now fanatically getting into Bitcoin. India has yet to really embrace it. That's going to be a big move for Bitcoin. The hedge funds are now buying it as an asset class because there's a way to do so with the Bitcoin Investment Trust in New York over their second market, the Barry, the guy's second market.
Yeah. Not the Winklevoss guys. It's a different guy.
That's right. They're big into it. They believe the market cap can get to 400 billion.
Okay.
From the current market cap at 12 to 13 billion.
Now, okay.
That's obviously a big move.
Yeah. There you go. There we go. Jon, thanks so much for being here.
No talk. Thank you
for having me. If people want to get a hold of you, I'm not going to tell you his email address, but it might have something to do with techstars.com and his first name, which is Jon, Jon.
Yep, that's it.
And Twitter, you're JD at JD.
Yeah.
Okay. You're one of the early Twitter adopters with the 1 and 2 letters.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky on that occasion.
Okay. Good. Max, you're at Max Kaiser. Twitter, what about StartJoin? If people want to get involved, what do they do?
We have a pre-registration up right now at startjoin.com.
Okay.
So you can pre-register. And then I think our beta opens up, we're doing an internal beta, starts next week. And I think we'll open it up within 4 weeks.
Are you going to give us any more details on this?
The basic strokes on it. I mean, it's crowdfunding, except, we're bringing in some new features, and it will have a Bitcoin piece within it going into it. The Bitcoin piece is kind of tricky because for a lot of reasons, and but we think we found something that'll work within this in this environment. So I think that'll be a lot of buzz. We've already got some people throwing money at it from the VC community at valuations that are beyond what I thought it would be worth even a week ago. So
fantastic. There goes the bubble.
There is the bubble. But a small bubble.
Yeah.
These small bubbles are starting to look bigger and bigger. There was a time when the entire universe was just a speck of dust, and then you had the Big Bang. You see, and this is from little specks of dust. From little small acorns.
You end up with the small finger.
Great oak trees grow.
All right, you heard it here first from Max Kaiser. This is a tiny speck, soon to be the big bang here, a London technology scene. Jon, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Your episode number 23. If you want to follow us, we're at Silicon Reel Twitter. We just launched a brand new website that makes all of our guests look extremely good looking. It's amazing.
It will take a lot for that to happen.
Well, it's amazing what you can do with Photoshop. If you've got guest suggestions, please send them in to us. It's about the community and reflecting what's going on out there. We're having a lot of fun. But thanks, Max, for being the co-host.
Oh, thanks, Brian.
Much appreciated. And as we say, it's about the people. I wish you guys lots of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, take care.
Of course, when you're an entrepreneur, you want to retain as much as possible, and you want the highest price because it makes you feel good. But if you take money from an angel or crowdsourcing platform or for us at the wrong price, and you don't get to the next milestone, haven't created value, and you need to raise more money, going back to my Gutenberg story, then there's going to be pain, and the investors are going to be sorry, you're going to be sorry. So I would say this, wouldn't I? But pricing your company right, getting the right level of dilution is right, making sure you raise enough to get to where you want.